Welcome to Rewind Video. I'm Bob.
I'm Rob.
And we love movies. Good ones, bad ones, old ones, new ones, big movies, small movies. Rob, the video store is full of stories. Got some scary stories, some funny stories, dramatic stories, but if there's one type of story that defies any genre classification, it's true stories. Am I right?
All kinds of true stories.
Yeah, you can find them in every corner of the store. Now, in one corner of the store, we have the staff recommendation shelf. You and I are tasked with restocking it on a regular basis. Each time we do, we adhere to a theme. And this week, we've collected 6 movies that tell true stories.
I'm excited about this one.
Yeah?
I'm excited about all of them.
Yeah. We never do a bad job.
No.
So, I, like you, share some enthusiasm for our themes. I can't say that I was necessarily stoked about this, but as is often the case, once I dove in and started poking around and seeing what movies might fit the bill, sure enough, there were some ones that I was really excited to talk about.
One of the reasons I chose this is there are so many movies that are true stories, especially if you're willing to expand the definition of true story. You have so many to choose from, and I love those kinds of topics.
Yeah, I think when people hear true stories, they probably think, well, this is going to be a whole episode about biopics. But yeah, it's a much broader theme than just biopics.
Yes, you could even possibly have a horror movie that's a true story.
You could. I was curious if there would be any horror movies that I'd want to nominate, and the Amityville Horror series is based on a true story. But
yeah, I mean, the
movie is not very good.
Poltergeist is apparently, The Conjuring. I mean, these are all true stories,
right.
But we know that they're not actually true.
Apparently, on the lists that I looked up of horror movies that are based in fact in some way, shape, or form, Nightmare on Elm Street kept popping up. And I was like, wait a minute, come on now. And I guess there's some basis of fact about a guy who died because of terrible dreams that he was having, but
yeah, that would be hard to pull off. I think
yes.
We might have some words about that,
right?
If you try to put it on the shelf, but hey, I'm open to a lot of things.
right.
I think sometimes in these true story movies, there can be tension in what in these stories is true and what in these stories is not true.
One of my movies deals in that in a big way.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I agree with you. I'm excited to talk about it. And very much looking forward to your first choice. This is one that I really liked. So, why don't we dive in?
All right, I'm going to get started with a movie from 2019. This movie is called Dolemite Is My Name. This is directed by Craig Brewer. He directed Hustle and Flow. Are you familiar with that one?
I am.
And the Footloose remake.
3 6 Mafia won an Academy Award for their contribution to Hustle and Flow.
Really?
Yes.
Well, props to them.
Mm-hmm.
This is written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. They wrote Man on the Moon, The People vs. Larry Flint, and Ed Wood, which this movie actually has a lot of parallels to, I think.
It does have some parallels to Ed Wood. Wow, they've got some impressive credits to their name.
Yeah, and People vs. Larry Flint, also a true story. Man on the Moon, true story. Ed Wood, true story. These guys deal in the trade of turning true stories into movies.
They can't make things up.
Well, I mean, you're good at what you're good at.
Yeah.
And they found their niche.
Agreed.
Here's the back of the box. The story of Rudy Ray Moore, who created the iconic big screen pimp character Dolemite in the 1970s. Tagline, make your own legend. He does.
He does, yes. Yeah.
This was kind of billed as Eddie Murphy's big return. Even though he had kind of done some things in the years since the Pluto Nash days. Sure. The movie that he was wearing a plastic shirt.
Right.
That was his character choice. This is actually kind of a comeback for Wesley Snipes, too.
I was about to say, how is the Wesley Snipes presence in this film not a bigger story? Because he steals the show for me.
I think when this movie came out, it was billed as like Eddie Murphy's back and Wesley Snipes is back. And I don't think this was, I think this is maybe his first big movie, but I don't think it was Wesley Snipes' first movie out of prison.
Right.
But it was like his first big movie. He's with Eddie Murphy. It was like this return of like these two guys from the 80s and 90s. And then like that, I mean, I think it's just kind of the culture nowadays that just kind of like died off a little bit. But this is a story of determination. It's about knowing exactly what you want and just like believing in yourself.
It is. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Like that's what he does. He's like, no, like I want to be in a movie. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Tell me I can't be in a movie.
Yeah. It's a celebration of movie making, but it's a heartwarming story.
It certainly is. Some of the plot points can be a little pat at times.
Yeah.
There's a point where he says like, oh, you should be a comedian, and then like the next scene she's a comedian
and a great one.
Yeah, and like polished, like she knows what she's doing.
Right.
And there's a lot of parts of this movie that kind of happens, but you know, I'm okay with it. This movie's not interested in getting into the down and dirty plot mechanics. It's like, no, it just happened.
Yeah, it's got a big story to tell, and it needs to probably breeze through some of the minor plot points a little bit.
And it's fine. Rudy Ray Moore has these big dreams.
Yeah.
And of course, he accomplishes them by kind of taking them on one at a time. He keeps setting up these goals for himself, and then he just like grinds away until he's done it. He puts out these albums, like then he first of all he creates the character, then he like does the albums, and he's like, no, I'm going to be a movie star. Then he is a movie star. He continually bets on himself in like a very real way, in a way that like he's putting his whole career on the line every single time. Like all of his money, every dollar he could ever possibly make is on the line every step of the way. And he's like, no, I'm just going to do it.
And he does, and he succeeds.
And you said you have not seen the original Dolemite?
I've not seen the movie that is being made in this movie.
Yeah.
Which is a real movie, but no, I have not seen it.
Well, Is My Name does understand like Dolemite, the original, that what it's really all about is that like Dolemite flavor.
Sure.
You know, it's going for a party movie vibe. Like it's a party movie, not quite as much as the original Dolemite, but you know, I love the idea of a party album, which is something that Rudy Ray Moore makes as the Dolemite character. And I was thinking that like that should come back, right? Party albums, or at least like a party YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm going to stand up here, we're going to play music and tell jokes. Like maybe that exists. Someone send us a link.
I'd watch.
It's definitely something that should exist. But I don't know, this is just kind of like, it's casually raunchy. You know, there's a lot of motherfuckers thrown around, a lot of nudity. It's all done for, well, not all of it. A lot of it's done for laughs.
Yes.
They walk out of a movie at one point, and Rudy Ray Moore says to his friend, he's like, man, there's no titties, there's no funny, there's no kung fu.
Right.
And this movie delivers on all those things. It's like, why wouldn't you put those things in a movie?
Yeah.
It has that Rudy Ray Moore charisma and swagger to it. It's also got like a great musical element to it.
Oh, yeah.
With Craig Robinson, who does all of the actual singing.
Craig Robinson's always great. This is not the first time he's appeared in a movie on the staff recommendation shelf, and every time he does, he delivers.
Yeah. I think this is the first time he's appeared singing this much.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of like original music. The clothes are insane.
Oh,
I think accurate
terrific.
too. I don't think these are outrageous. This is how people dressed in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then there's just like a real looseness to the production. It's got a bit of like a comedy sketch feel to it.
It does. It made me wonder as I was watching it how much was tightly scripted, how much was improvised, because there's a lot of comedic actors in this who I think in another production would be let loose a little bit and given some free rein. So I was curious.
Although I will say it doesn't come across as super improvised to me.
No.
I think it's just kind of a looseness in the production, which I think may be an homage to the original, because the original is very much like that. You know, as low budget and whatever it was also was just very casual about itself. You know, but the performances have that looseness too, and there's just a real like. Yeah, there's a casual nature to the way they act and stuff, and I think the actors are having a ton of fun with these roles as well, and I think that comes across.
It does. Yeah, they definitely embody the characters that they're playing, and in a great way.
The question that keeps coming up in one way or another is like, should we take Dolemite seriously?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think Rudy Ray Moore was definitely in on the joke. I think a lot of people weren't quite sure. That's you know. It's a campy thing, and people didn't quite get what he was doing, and maybe he didn't get what he was doing exactly.
Yeah, you know, that question does come up, whether you should take Dolemite seriously. But I think it gets to a larger question that this movie is asking and kind of casting a spotlight on, which is where is the entertainment for black audiences in this period of time in America? Because Rudy Ray Moore definitely found, for lack of a better term, a white space for entertainment that specifically appealed to black people that they weren't getting from Hollywood or from record labels. And
well, it also appealed to not just black people, but it appealed to like certain demographics within that, where
socioeconomic
it's like,
and
where it's just like, it came down. Remember that part of the movie where he says like, you tell me I'm a big star in these 5 blocks and that's it. He's like, those 5 blocks exist in every town. I think it's also kind of a way of saying that, like we like movies that are funny and have titties and kung fu. He's like, me and my friends like that, and you're gonna tell me that like there aren't people like me and my friends everywhere,
right?
And he's like, he went out and he proved it.
He did.
He did.
And
that's what he was doing. I think the big theme of the movie is summed up at the end when one of the guys I think that works in the theater says something like, "Is this supposed to be funny?"
Yeah.
And Rudy Ray Moore is just like, "Yeah, it's comedy. It's sexy. It's action." He's like, "Yeah, it's all those things. Like just because it's funny doesn't mean it's also not like a Shaft movie."
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that Rudy Ray Moore confronts throughout the story who don't quite get what he's doing. And, it even extends to the critics who review the movie at the end as they're kind of driving up to the premiere. And in spite of that, he defies expectations and proves that, yes, there's an audience for what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And nobody's found it yet, but that's why I'm here.
Yeah. And that he builds this Dolemite character from the ground up, too. And that's such a great moment to see when you just see that spark. I mean, sure, he had some help from the street folk, but he put his own work into it to make this character his own, and it was a good look at the creative process. Even if it's a little like perfunctory, it's like, I'm gonna do this, and then the next scene he's done it. Right. But he's spent his whole life trying to create something, and then you see the exact moment when he finally realizes what it is he's been trying to say his whole life.
Yep.
So I think it's just, I think it's a charismatic, funny, raunchy movie. It's worthy of the guy that it's about, and it definitely belongs on the shelf for true stories.
Do we have the Dolemite movie on the actual movie on the shelves here?
We certainly do. I recommend that as well. I think obviously a great double feature.
Yeah.
You get to see a little bit of the movie at the end credits. But definitely watch the whole thing. It's like I said, it's a movie that's all about flavor. If you're looking for a plot that makes sense or great camera work, you're not going to get it. But it's just, and also in the original Dolemite, you get a lot more of the rhyming of him just like, hey, fellas, gather around. I'm going to tell you, some of his bits as Dolemite, and it's worth it just for that. It's fantastic.
Well, I agree. I really enjoyed this more than I thought I would. I think I told you that when this came out, it flew under the radar for me. I was just like, it's another Eddie Murphy movie. He hasn't done anything good in a long time. But yes, he came back and he made something awesome. And I got to say, fucking Wesley Snipes is in this movie is tremendous. Yeah. This is one of my favorite Wesley Snipes roles that I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's pretty great in this as an alcoholic director.
Yes, he is. And, he says something actually rather profound when he's talking to Rudy Ray Moore about how to shoot this movie. Mm-hmm. He talks about how it takes a certain style of lighting to capture black people on film. And that's indeed true. And Ryan Coogler understands it. That's, in my opinion, one of the things that makes the Black Panther movie and the MCU really tremendous is that the black people in this movie really, you see their complexion. They appear different on film. They appear like they're captured in an authentic way. And it's a real quick throwaway line in this movie, but it's indeed true. So yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's a winner. It's one of the reasons we have the staff recommendation shelf, to get people to take a second look at things.
Yes. Well, great choice. I'm going to. When was Dolemite? What year was Dolemite? I can't remember.
2019.
2019. Okay, we're going back in time by 9 years for my first movie. I am bringing to the shelf 2010's The Social Network. So yes, this is the story of Facebook, now Meta. We all know Facebook. This movie tells the story of how it came to be. Back of the box. On a fall night in 2003, Harvard undergrad and computer programming genius Mark Zuckerberg sits down at his computer and heatedly begins working on a new idea. In a fury of blogging and programming, what begins in his dorm room as a small site among friends soon becomes a global social network and a revolution in communication. A mere 6 years and 500 million friends later, Mark Zuckerberg is the youngest billionaire in history, but for this entrepreneur, success leads to both personal and legal complications. Tagline, you don't get to 500 million friends without making a few enemies. Yes, so...
That is true.
Indeed. I think that a lot of people have probably seen The Social Network. But
it's an all-timer.
It's an all-timer, but I think this movie continues to become more interesting over time, and the way we watch it and what we take away from it changes as Facebook and Meta continues to change, and Mark Zuckerberg's role in the world.
It's weird that this movie is still a masterpiece, the same as it was when it came out. But it's almost seems that the story of what's going on in this movie matters less and less. Mm-hmm. Like, it's kind of insignificant how Facebook started. Like, it seems like we would be here no matter what. Like, Mark Zuckerberg kind of didn't create this, or even though he did create like a corner of it, like he was just the first one there.
The world was waiting for something like this to happen, and he happened to be the guy that did it, I think. I agree with you. Their contribution and the genesis of Facebook doesn't matter much anymore. It's
especially because it's going to be out of business in the next like 2.5 years anyway.
Right. So, Social Network, directed by David Fincher, screenplay from Aaron Sorkin. He won an Oscar for it, in fact.
It's an amazing screenplay.
It really is, and I have some interesting things to say about it as we move along. But you've also got a collection of actors here who are not only perfect for their parts, but performing at the top of their game. So this might be my favorite Fincher movie, and I'm saying that knowing that this is the man that gave us Seven, Fight Club, Zodiac, The Game, Panic Room. We won't mention Alien 3, but...
it's definitely better than Alien 3
yeah,
on my list.
Yes, I agree. How he didn't win Best Director for this movie, which I think went to the guy who directed The King's Speech, is fucking beyond me. The Academy Awards are just ridiculous. But
one of the reasons is we don't pay attention to the Academy Awards here at the store.
No. But our contribution to cinema might at some point earn us a role in the Academy, and I look forward to that day.
Yes, or maybe the Academy should look forward to it. Maybe we should start our own awards show.
Oh, I don't mind that.
The Rewindies.
Right. So we've got Jesse Eisenberg playing Mark Zuckerberg. Andrew Garfield is his business partner, Eduardo Saverin. Armie Hammer plays two characters, the Winklevoss twins. This is presumably before he began developing an interest in eating people. And then Justin Timberlake is Sean Parker. There's also some great cameos from Rooney Mara, Dakota Johnson, Rashida Jones. I always remember Rooney Mara being in this movie more than she is, but she's in 3 scenes.
Yeah, very little.
Yeah, but she has a pretty impactful presence on the film. So yes, definitely the story of Facebook here, but also a character study of Mark Zuckerberg. Not a wholly accurate one. I think that this movie vilifies him more than he actually was. Like, these guys were dumb college students. Yes, they, the face mash thing where like the Hot or Not website they create is sleazy and fucked up. But
he's also a 19-year-old drunk kid.
He's a 19-year-old drunk kid, yeah. And when I was 19 and drunk, I was doing dumb things. I wasn't building, global websites, but
yeah.
But yeah,
I actually did.
Oh,
yeah, good,
cool.
I was a real drunk.
So, in spite of the fact that, yes, this is really mostly about Zuckerberg and the relationships that he has and the people who are involved in building this story, Facebook is still pretty front and center. And since this movie came out, Facebook has really evolved. Like, I think at the time it was like valued at a $25 billion company. Now it's like in hundreds of billions.
Yeah. This was what, 2010, right?
This was 2010.
The mobile app came out in 2012, and that's when everything changed.
That's when everything changed. And, that was even before Facebook owned Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger. And, since this movie arrived on the scene, Facebook has become something completely different. More than a social network, it's a news source. It's impacted elections. It's how the world gets information now. It was gigantic then, but it's significantly bigger today.
Yeah. And somehow at the same time, nobody I know uses it.
No, yeah. Yeah, it's for parents, I think.
Yeah. The store doesn't even have an account anymore.
No, we don't. and we're better for it.
Yes.
So it's kind of crazy how quickly this movie came together. Sorkin wrote the screenplay based on a book that hadn't been released yet. Fincher got it on a Friday. The movie was greenlit by Monday, and I think the cast that they wanted they secured in large part very quickly. The only actor who was maybe up for a role who didn't get it was what's his name, the Transformers kid who. Shia LaBeouf, who was apparently up for the Zuckerberg role and didn't turned it down.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Jesse Eisenberg, in spite of being somewhat of a one-note actor, I think this is exactly the note that he plays well.
It's hard to imagine this part being played by anybody else.
Yeah. I agree. So why did I choose this? This movie continues to stay relevant because Facebook continues to stay relevant. And, as I think people's opinion of Facebook and Meta sours, the interpretation of the film evolves. There was a lot of blowback upon release because, yes, the interpretation of Zuckerberg was maybe not wholly accurate. I think that because of how popular this was and how many people saw it, it has informed the opinion that we have of Mark Zuckerberg. He's an emperor today and definitely a weird alien-like dude. But
yeah, he looks kind of like a lizard when he talks.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of fascinated by how this movie might play a role in the way we see this guy who's in charge of everything. I also love the script. So Sorkin is divisive. There's a whole lot of Sorkin things here. What's interesting is this screenplay is 162 pages long. The movie is 2 hours. Typically, a page in a screenplay is a minute long, is a minute of screen time, right?
Yeah, not in Sorkin screenplays.
Not in Sorkin screenplays. Everybody talks so fast here, and he apparently, I learned this from the Rewatchables podcast. Apparently, David Fincher invited Sorkin over to his house when the screenplay was complete and said, Aaron Sorkin, read this the way you hear it being delivered in your head.
Yeah.
And he did. And he went through it incredibly fast. And Sorkin was like, all right, that's how I'm going to direct it. And so when he would give actors notes on their scenes, he'd be like, okay, you did a phenomenal job. Everything's good. You just need to deliver this like 30 seconds faster than you did.
That's not how we're doing it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how Sorkin did The West Wing too. It was, it was just a da-da-da-da-da-da the whole time. But that was like, that's what he does.
It is what he does. And he does it so well. I mean, when you consider the fact that this is largely a movie about depositions and then also coding, it has no business being as entertaining as it is.
Yes.
And yet it's super just captivating and compelling from start to finish.
It's kind of expertly crafted in every way too, in a very Fincher way.
Yeah, it is. There's jumps in time, but they work, and yeah, it's a beautiful puzzle that's put together in a wonderful way. Last thing that I'll say about just what I love is the score for this with Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor is incredible. It was their first collaboration and the first movie score that they did, and it's just so unique and
it's haunting at times.
It's so haunting.
Not quite horror vibes, but like just to the edge of that.
Yeah. It's calming, but also anxiety inducing, and it's so different from what I think we were getting in terms of film scores at the time, and it definitely catapulted these guys into stardom. They've scored a lot of things since then, but this, in my opinion, is still their very best. Social Network lands at a 3.9 on Letterboxd, and I love it. I'll watch this movie anytime I see it on, or even if I have nothing to watch. It's a great time.
Yeah, it's kind of a masterpiece. I think for me it's second behind Fight Club on the list of Finchers.
Interesting.
I
But
think
above 7.
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
I do think it's a great example of how Fincher is at his best when he has a very strong collaborator
Yes.
or like some very strong ideas that he's working with. I think I think that, the Sorkin script here is just like, and the fact that he was like, no, we're going to say it like this. I think like that's when Fincher's at his best. I think he needs a little bit of that support there to make like a truly great movie. And this is definitely one of them.
I'm glad you like it. It's it just keeps getting better for me. And one final thing is the CG work with Armie Hammer playing 2 roles is phenomenal.
Seamless.
Yeah, you wouldn't know that it's. I mean, I wasn't introduced to Armie Hammer until this, and
I thought it was twins.
I thought it was twins. Yeah, I thought it was twins.
It's pretty great.
He is fantastic in that role. So yeah, that's my first choice. True
Excellent
Stories.
choice. Yeah, one of my favorite movies.
Great.
I'm gonna choose a movie that, now that I'm thinking of, actually, I think it's very similar in tone to The Social Network. I'm gonna choose a movie from 1994. It's called Quiz Show.
Quiz Show.
Directed by Robert Redford. You might know him as an actor.
Right.
As a director, he's best known for Ordinary People and A River Runs Through It. This is written by Paul Atanasio, who also wrote Donnie Brasco, which is a true story.
Boy, the guys who are responsible for true stories love to tell true stories.
I think it's kind of like when you're like a book writer. Like once you get into like true story, like I'm gonna like write like a true crime story. Like, it's kind of hard to move over to novels.
Right.
I think you're kind of one or the other at some point.
That's fair.
But hey, you're good at what you're good at.
Yes, indeed.
Here's the back of the box. A young lawyer, Richard Goodwin, investigates a potentially fixed game show. Charles Van Doren, a big-time show winner, is under Goodwin's investigation. Tagline: 50 million people watched, but no one saw a thing. This is the true story of the 21 quiz show scandal. There was at least one other show involved in this, maybe a couple others, but this movie kind of just pretends like it's just this one show.
Right.
John Turturro and Ray Fiennes are the pivotal contestants in this story, and Rob Morrow is a government investigator. He's looking into the potential that these shows were rigged. But to me, this is a perfectly crafted movie.
Oh, go on.
Well, I mean, just in the sense in the way that like The Social Network is.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's just like everything about this is just very like dialed in and like very well done, and like there are no iffy spots to this movie. It's all very, very sharp.
Yeah, it's tight.
Very tight.
Yeah.
But particularly the period piece aspect of this stands out to me, where it's like it seems airtight. Like everything about this movie seems like it's from the 1950s. It looks and feels and sounds like the 1950s.
Yeah.
This movie could have been produced in the 1950s. I think the film stock even looks
It's pretty remarkable.
a little old.
Yeah.
The DVD I watched this on had some maybe it was just the print that was used for the DVD, but it had some like scratches and it had that look to it.
Okay.
And I don't know if you saw some of that.
I watched a streaming version of this. So
did it have any of that?
No, it didn't have any artifacts or anything. So
Okay.
yeah.
I wondered if maybe that was part of the look of it. But I wasn't really sure. So I guess it was just the print that they used for the DVD.
I should have kept it.
Yeah. But nothing about this movie feels like it's from the 1990s.
No, I agree.
Even the performances, and that's usually what gives it away, but even the performances seem like these people are from the 50s.
Yeah.
And they're all off the charts good. From the leads all the way down to the bit parts. Like everybody's great in this movie.
I couldn't help but to but to applaud the casting choices, because there's something about John Turturro and Ralph Fiennes especially. These guys just feel like they belong to a different era.
100%.
And yeah, I buy them completely in the 1950s. As characters from that era.
100%, yeah. Every world that this movie inhabits is fully realized. It goes from the TV studio to the Van Doren estate to Congress and to Queens, even Queens. Like, it all just seems like completely real and realized, lived in. The cinematography is amazing. I always think of that shot from behind Ray Fiennes' head, where it's a pull in, and then I don't even know what that's called, but it's amazing. It's just like it's stunning.
Yes.
But the 50s were this moment in time too when we really began to allow our lives to be dominated by spectacle, and I think that's what this movie's really getting at.
Yeah, it is, and it's fascinating because it made me wonder, what was it that did people just need to feel like they were rooting for a Ken Jennings-esque character, or why couldn't it have worked without somebody continuing to win and win and win?
The game shows were sold as like a real intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
Right. But they were just show business the whole time. I think what it was that the people who were producing these shows and when were in charge of the networks, producing the shows, whatever, I think they were just like Ivy League college types. And they assumed that people watching TV would be attracted to or impressed by knowledge. Like, hey, look at all these people know.
So smart.
Yeah, and so it's a very elitist attitude going they're going to love this. But that's why they rigged the shows instead of making them easier. Because in real life, and they don't really get to this in the movie, in real life, the reason they rigged it was because when they started doing it was because people couldn't get the answers right.
Oh.
And they were like, well, shit, no one's watching. And so instead of making the questions easier, they're like, well, just give them the answers. And then that's when they realize, oh, people like it when the same winner's here all the time.
Right.
And in the movie, they kind of make it seem like it was always the plan to just rig it because people love a winner, Yeah. That's not really what happened. It took them a while to realize that, just making a dumb show is easier to do and easier to produce, it's easier to sell. So it took them a while to realize that. But at first it was just well, they don't know the answers.
Yeah.
Instead of why would anybody know what Paul Revere's horse's name was? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why would anybody believe that anybody knew that?
Right.
But Herb Stempel is. It struck me that he was kind of like the proto-influencer, where he was he had his moment of fame, but not because he produced anything of lasting value. He was just he served his purpose of selling Geritol,
right?
And then he was discarded. But it actually might work as a TikTok personality right now.
Yeah,
like Herb Stempel, the know-it-all that everybody hates.
Right. Yeah.
But everybody in this movie is seeking fame and money, and they want to do it in an easy way.
The allure of celebrity status is such a big component of this.
Celebrity status, or even the producers, they're like, how can we make some? We're just trying to get eyeballs. We're trying to sell Geritol. We want some. They're just trying to make money, and they don't really care why or how. And meanwhile, while we're all worried about fancy cars and these dumb game shows, the Russians are launching Sputnik into space, and that's how this movie starts.
Yeah.
And then it cuts immediately to this major security apparatus that we have around a game show's questions, and granted, we know how that turned out, but still, it's a very, very obvious contrast between, here's the Russians going to space, and we're just worried about this stupid fucking TV show.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and also it almost makes it seem like there was more of a respect for knowledge or education back in those days, and I'm not sure if that's true, but watching this movie at first, you're like, oh man, people were really impressed by people who read books and remembered things and whatever, but They were just addicted to the drama of it. They didn't really care.
They didn't care.
And we know that now.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, our entire culture has just become this, where it's just like, oh no, people don't actually care about the substance of anything. Like, and literally nothing. So we can just make it all showbiz. So we just tailor it for the lowest common denominator.
It's funny. I saw this for the first time before we ever had a run on Jeopardy, like we did with Ken Jennings and some of the guys who have, gone on to really make their mark on that show. And it's funny because you realize that, yes, it's possible that something like this could have actually happened without manipulation. But, they manufactured it. And
I also think it's, I don't know if it's hilarious or not, but like the way they look at like the institution of television and because there was this attitude of back then, at least there was a lingering attitude of, we have to make sure that they're telling the truth, and we have to make sure that it's like there's this integrity in television. And now like that's an absurd notion. Like if somebody's making a television show, like you assume there's no integrity involved. Why would they care?
So I agree with you, but I think there's a lot of America who doesn't complete that step because reality television today, it's all scripted, but I think a lot of the world doesn't get it. I think they believe that this is actually happening organically, and it's not.
But they don't care. That's the point. They don't care.
True. They don't care.
And like on some level, it doesn't matter. Like it's, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, there's no consequence to it. It's just who's going to throw, a dish at somebody this week on Bravo.
But yeah, I love almost everything about Quiz Show. I love the way it looks, the way it sounds, the way it tells a story about how we got where we are, and it's through a true story. Yeah. So I'm putting it on the staff recommendation shelf this week.
You didn't mention Martin Scorsese.
Oh, he does. Yeah, Martin Scorsese is great in this.
He is. Shows up with his big old eyebrows and
he personifies the "what the fuck, we're just selling Geritol here" attitude.
Yes, yeah. I really love this movie. And it's one of those films, to your earlier point, that because it's a period piece, you can put this on whenever, and it feels like a movie that could have been made today. And
could have been made 50 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. So great selection. Yeah. This is a fun one. I saw this late, by the way. It was a few years ago that I watched it for the first time.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. But glad I did. All right. So I'm bringing my second movie to the table or the shelf, as it were, and my choice is I, Tonya from 2017. Back of the box. Competitive ice skater Tonya Harding rises amongst the ranks of the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, but her future in the sport is thrown into doubt when her ex-husband intervenes. Tagline, fitting in is overrated. So we all remember the story of Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, but the backstory and the state of the country is really interesting to look back on now, which I think is what makes this movie pretty interesting. This movie, like my third film, which we'll get to shortly, opens with a statement about the fact that this is a true story. Yes. I think in this case they say this is a true story told without irony or something like that. So in the case of I, Tonya, we're given different takes on the story from each of the people involved. There's Tonya herself, Tonya's mom, Tonya's ex-husband, her bodyguard, air quotes, big air quotes there, her coach,
her security expert bodyguard.
Right. Everyone has a slightly different take on how things unfolded, and it's up to the audience to kind of decide what is true. Fact of the matter is, there's probably some truth woven into everybody's interpretation of what happened. So, what is the story we're talking about? In case anyone needs a reminder, Tonya Harding, elite figure skater at the time. This is early 90s. She didn't quite fit the mold of the stereotypical figure skating athlete. She didn't come from money. She was more of a part of a poor lower class family who struggled to find her place among similar skaters. As she rose through the ranks on talent alone, her ex-husband continued to drag her down, culminating in a decision between him and his friend to attack Nancy Kerrigan, which resulted in her being unable to skate in a national competition. Tonya's connection to the attack results in her avoiding jail time but being banned from competitive figure skating for life. So, this to me is another instance of a great cast, kind of further elevating an already great script. Margot Robbie's pretty fantastic as Nancy, as Tonya Harding. Sebastian Stan plays her husband, and I had only known him from his role as Bucky Barnes and the Winter Soldier in the MCU. So this was a surprising take for him. But Allison Janney practically steals every scene that she's in as Tonya's mom. This is directed by Craig Gillespie. He's responsible for Lars and the Real Girl, the Fright Night remake, and some TV commercials. He's also directed a few episodes of the Pam and Tommy series, which also has Sebastian Stan. So,
okay.
The idea for this movie came from the screenwriter Steve Rogers, who watched a figure skating documentary that featured Tonya Harding. He then arranged some interviews to kind of dig into that story a little bit more with Tonya, her ex-husband, and family, and realized that when he was interviewing these people, all of them had just dramatically different interpretations of everything that unfolded. And it just became a fascinating experience. And he was like, I can turn this into a movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a wild story. Like, no matter
it is
what perspective you take. Like, this is just wild. And some, like, something was true, and no matter what was true is wild.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I went into this movie expecting, the typical biopic where it's like, okay, you're gonna tell a story about a secondary character in the world who probably deserves more attention than he or she got, and it's gonna be a heartwarming tale that's gonna change my opinion of the person. But I don't really think that's what this is looking to do. It's really just looking to tell an honest story about who this person was and let the audience kind of draw their own conclusion about what went down.
She does come across, Tonya Harding does, as like the most reliable character.
She does.
And maybe she is. I don't know, maybe that's just because she's the main character of the movie too.
Yeah. I appreciated getting some background on Tonya Harding's upbringing. I think that, I remember watching the Olympics when all of this went down and being captivated by the story as it unfolded. I don't think I needed to know that she was more of a rural girl. You can kind of tell. And so like that wasn't surprising to me, but I think the reason to pick this movie up is for the characters and their performances. Like I said, Allison Janney is so good.
What's the guy's name? Sean Eckhart,
who plays the bodyguard?
Who is the bodyguard?
Who is the bodyguard? Yeah.
Well, he plays the bodyguard. I guess Sean Eckhart did play the bodyguard. But,
right. Yeah.
He again is just like a completely wild character.
Oh my gosh.
But like, we all know that guy too.
Yeah.
Like who just is completely full of shit. A complete bullshitter.
Oh, yeah. Tells nothing but lies, but there's always every lie he tells.
But there's always somebody who plays along with it and is dumb enough to believe him. And you found that guy.
yes.
And Jeff Galooly.
And, similar to Dolemite, where, there's some footage of the real thing at the end of the movie. You get that here with I, Tonya, where you get some of the interviews with that bodyguard guy, and it's like, this motherfucker really believes that he was, like, working in espionage for the U.S. government, and it's complete bullshit. But
I think those people are a lot more visible now on the internet. Oh, just like all these people who just posing with guns and going like, I'm a security expert. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right. And to the point about this character in particular, this is a really funny film. It's not funny in a traditional way, I think. The humor is subtle, but it's woven in naturally with the dialogue or some of the physical performances of the actors, even the way the events unfold. It doesn't hurt that Tonya Harding in real life surrounded herself with some very colorful, sometimes idiotic people. There's one line in the movie that every time I think about it, it just fucking cracks me up. Where the bodyguard character is trying to say, balls are already in motion.
Yeah.
But I think what he says is balls are already being played with.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Completely straight face.
We're trying to say the balls are in the air.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Balls are.
And
in
then he
the
says
air.
the balls are being played with.
There's a lot of instances like that in the movie that are just
This movie is all about the characters, like
Yes.
spending time with the characters, because they're all just like complete goofballs. And the little bit that I know about this story from real life, and then seeing the accompanying footage and stuff, it's like it just backs it up. Like, it's not that far off. These are actual goofballs.
Oh, they are. And somehow they found themselves on a national stage.
Right.
And I think that all of this happened at a moment in time that was kind of perfect for it to capture everybody's attention, because Harding's image and the way that people perceive her is something. This movie examines that, and it's definitely something that held her back throughout her life.
1994.
1994, right? Yeah. The fact that she's not this traditional ice skater, and people judge her for her upbringing.
Yeah.
This whole thing is exacerbated when her cohorts attack Kerrigan. But all of this unfolded around the time that the 24-hour news network was just coming into being.
Yeah, exactly.
And this was pre-OJ, and they needed content. And
Yes.
This just happened to take place at a time when the CNNs of the world needed to fill airtime, and it was the only thing that they talked about.
If this happened today, it would be huge news for like 4 hours.
Oh, yeah. And then they would move on, and you'd forget about it. Yeah.
One of the things I didn't like about this movie, very minor nit to pick, is how they kind of conflated the fact that ice skating is a sport that like style does matter. Mm-hmm. You have to do it in a certain style, and it has to look a certain way. And they kind of conflated that with also the attitude that like, oh, she's this like white trash girl, and we don't like her because skating's not like that, which is also like that's a shitty attitude to take, and like but they kind of made it the same problem. They didn't really make it clear that like, yeah, but like your style does matter, and they can vote against that. And so like,
right.
She didn't have, they even showed this in the movie. Like, she didn't have like the preferred style. It's not, when what they're looking for in ice skating necessarily.
Yeah. You're right, and
it's not a skills competition.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting because this story happened, and Tonya Harding kind of appeared on the scene maybe a decade before figure skating really changed, where figure skaters weren't afraid to hide their sexuality and do very different things with their music. Now, style was still very much a part of that, and a traditional upbringing probably still plays a role today in who succeeds and who doesn't. But yeah, Tonya Harding definitely tried to defy expectations or just fit outside the normal.
I don't think she had to try.
She didn't try. Yeah, she just did fit outside of
yeah,
expectations.
I mean, it's that attitude of like you're the in crowd or you're not the in crowd.
Right.
I don't think it's necessarily like you grew up in this place we don't like. I think it's more like either you're going to fit in or you're not, and she didn't really attempt to.
She didn't attempt
and
to.
those kinds of groups don't like that. But she could fucking skate, like maybe she wasn't the most graceful, but she could land that jump that no one else could. And I think that this movie does a great job of showing like the things that she is good at.
Yes.
In the actual movie, and then at the end when they show her actual routine, I think it's pretty moving.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, for a brief moment in time, she was the best skater in the world,
yes.
as the only person who could land that jump. But yeah, I do think that this kind of paved the way for, in the way that the story was covered, it definitely paved the way and revealed our nation's appetite for controversy and celebrity drama. It showed the networks that, oh wow, if we just find more of these stories, we can, continue to chew up ratings. And
it warmed us up for OJ.
It did, and probably Trump.
Yeah,
like down the road. This is another movie with some amazing music. Not a score in this case, but a soundtrack. Got Dire Straits, ZZ Top, Foreigner, En Vogue, Supertramp, Heart, Violent Femmes. There's so many good artists on this soundtrack. But yeah, I Tonya isn't concerned with telling one true story. It tells the truth as everyone involved remembers it, and I love that. It averages a 3.9 on Letterboxd. I also like that it doesn't shy away from touching on Tonya's brief boxing career, which hit later in life.
I do. I mean, I think just based on the text of the movie, it's bullshit that she couldn't keep skating, right?
Yeah, right.
Why does she have to box?
Yeah. The last line of this film is, "And that's the fucking truth." And for that reason, I'm putting it on the shelf for true stories.
Well, I guess we don't know what the real truth is, but we know it's fucked up.
It's in there.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Okay, I'm gonna take us back to 2002. This is a Brazilian movie. It's called City of God. It's directed by Fernando Meirelles and Katja Lund. Here's the back of the box. In the slums of Rio, two kids' paths diverge as one struggles to become a photographer and the other a kingpin. I don't know that it's just about two kids.
No. It's about a city.
Yeah, it's about a whole area
and a whole bunch of people living in it. Yeah.
So yeah, this is an epic crime movie about the favelas outside of Rio de Janeiro.
For sure.
We follow a group of boys. They range in age from teenagers down to, I don't know, 8. They're very young, up until they become older teenagers.
Yeah.
And then some of them get caught up in the gangs. Some of them run the gangs. Some of them try to avoid the gangs. But they all live in these slums, and this is their story. In my opinion, this is one of the greatest gangster movies of all time.
Oh, yeah. This out Goodfellas, I think.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. I mean, it's very heavily influenced by Goodfellas, obviously. It has a lot of similar beats, a similar structure. I mean, I'm not mad about that. I love Goodfellas. I prefer this to Goodfellas. Although at times this is kind of a vignette movie. It's trying to tell a lot of different stories.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to make the case that like this is better than The Godfather or whatever. I think, but if there was like a Premier League of great gangster movies, this would definitely be in the top 20 or so.
Yeah.
This is told from the perspective mostly of somebody who's not in the gang, so I think that's where it kind of gets set apart.
Yeah.
I love the naturalistic quality to this movie, the world that it takes place in.
Oh,
it's just like it feels. I mean, it's one of the most real movies I've ever experienced.
It's shot on 16 millimeter, which gives it that documentary feel. And I mean, the fact that it's, Rocket kind of anchors this as like the photographer, and like it feels gritty and
we start
fucking real.
We start with that knife being sharpened on a stone, which is kind of like gives it that I don't know, that textual quality. Mm-hmm. The actors in this movie, I mean, they come across as like completely real people. They all they're all kids from the slums, and they just like gathered up these kids and they took them to like a workshop for a couple of months.
Really?
Which instead of like, they didn't like teach them how to act necessarily. They're like, all right, cool. We're going to teach you how to like act like in this movie, like just act like kids and doing gang stuff. And
we're going to teach you how to do what you already do, but just for the camera.
Right. Exactly. And the performances are like universally great. But like maybe it's hard to tell. I don't know. Sometimes with foreign movies, it's hard to say like, oh, it's great acting or not, because it reminds me of when Chow Yun-fat became big in America. Do you remember that? That was like the 90s or 2000s or whatever.
Yep. And
everyone in America was like, this guy is like a revelation, and like people from China were like, we think he's corny. You know what I mean? They're like, what do you mean? Like, you guys think he's a good actor? But like all the performances in this movie come across like so great. There's a great chicken performance in this movie.
Oh, tremendous chicken performance.
Even does a stunt.
Yes. You're talking about getting, between the wheels of that truck?
Yeah. And I always thought like, is that a real shot? Like, or did they fake that, or like how do you do that? But then I was like, because in the plot, the chicken has to get through, right?
Yes.
But then I was like, well, no, they just used a different chicken. If the chicken didn't make it, they just used a
different chicken. They're pretty expensive.
Yeah, they don't have to fake it, but but they did shoot this movie in an actual favela, not the one that it takes place in, because that apparently was like going through some like major gang violence at the time, and they couldn't shoot there, so they had to shoot in a different one. But I mean, this kind of feels to me like like The Godfather, you know, like it has that same on the ground, in the life atmosphere that The Godfather has. Like you said, that documentary quality that's really hard to find.
Well, I think that contributes to even how the performances are captured because. Yes, it's sometimes difficult to measure a performance when it's a foreign film, but the way this is shot and how candid it is, you feel like you're kind of removed from the scene and just watching something unfold from afar, and that helps.
Yeah, and there's even some parts that get repeated in the movie that kind of become these memes after you've seen this movie a couple times, like that door knock just like over and over again, it just has that quality to it. But the characters are really what drives this movie. I think there's about 10 or 12 characters that have like complete character arcs.
There's a lot of fucking characters in this movie. It's a little it's not a quibble. It's a little hard to keep track of the first time through, but yeah, you're in a world.
Yes, absolutely. And like even characters that are only in the movie for a few minutes, they generally have a complete arc.
Yeah.
Like that one guy who kills his wife. Like he's only in the movie for 5 minutes, maybe.
Yeah. But you really feel like you understand him. I mean, you definitely get,
Rocket is the ostensibly the main character. He's kind of the audience surrogate, but like he doesn't really get it. He maybe is the one that doesn't get like a completely satisfying story.
Yeah,
we kind of get like a teased romance here that doesn't work at all, and then another one that like, doesn't really go anywhere either. And I don't know, his story, like he becomes a photographer and whatnot, but like he's just there to observe things happening.
Yes, which is interesting because he's kind of the narrator of the movie, and he's kind of carrying you through scenes that he's not even a part of, which is weird, but it works.
Yeah. I'm not, again, like it probably doesn't, it doesn't meet strict guidelines for like perspective.
Whatever. But whatever.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm good with it too.
The Lil Zay Benny storyline is really the backbone of this movie. Yeah. Lil Zay, he's just like, I'm not sure that him as a child matches up with him as an adult completely, because like when he's an 8-year-old, he's apparently a complete psychopath.
Right.
And then when he's an adult, I guess he seems a little bit more measured or whatever. But he seems like a pretty good slum boss, I mean, honestly, like he's not the worst.
B+.
Everything's in order. Like you can't do bad stuff. Like he's allowed to do bad stuff, but no one else is allowed to. So like I don't know. I think he seems okay. Benny seems cool, he just wants to like make his money and get out. So like, I don't know. He's also a way for us to see the fun side of this because like these are teenagers. This is literally Goodfellas, but with like 16-year-olds. So like they like to dance. They like to mess around with their friends and wear cool clothes.
I actually think if this were a movie told strictly with adult characters, it wouldn't be fun to watch. It would actually be hard to watch.
It needs that youthful energy.
Yeah, there's some levity. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is honestly, if I had to pick my top 5 movies, this very well could be in the top 5 movies of all time. I love this movie. Everything about it. The story, it's definitely mostly true. I don't know either. I don't know the exact story. It's hard to find the details, but yeah, this is a definite winner. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I'm putting it on the shelf for true stories.
I think the character that's most interesting in this is the city because it connects all the characters. It's definitely supposed to be Rio de Janeiro, but you don't see the Christ the Redeemer statue at any point in time.
That's not the Rio that these people live in.
Right, yeah. And religion, I think it's acknowledged at this point that it's not part of these people's lives.
Well, there are 2 religious ceremonies in this.
There are
in this movie, and both times that it happens, there's those characters engage in like horrible violence directly afterwards.
Right.
So there is a sense of like religion having a presence, but you don't really get what it is.
Yeah.
Just that it seems to cause horrible violence.
I love the city. You feel like you're getting a glimpse of a fraction of this massive, massive city. And you can't help but to feel like there's so many more stories to be told in this place. But here's the one we're dealing with today, and it's an incredible one.
Yeah, definitely watch this movie.
Fine choice. This has been on my list for a long time, and I'm glad I had a reason to watch it.
Me too.
Well, I'm going to bring my final movie to the table, and we're going way back to 1963 for The Great Escape. Back of the box synopsis here. The Nazis, exasperated at the number of escapes from their prison camps by a relatively small number of Allied prisoners, relocate them to a high-security, escape-proof camp to sit out the remainder of the war. Undaunted, the prisoners plan one of the most ambitious escape attempts of World War II, based on a true story. Tagline, put a fence in front of these men, and they'll climb it. What a great reputation to have. I climb fences.
Yeah. As long as it's in front of me, I'm going to climb it.
So I'm going to kind of jump right into what fascinates me about this film. If you didn't know that this was a true story, and again, this film proclaims right from the get-go, with big on-screen supers that it's true, I think you'd criticize this for being too divorced from reality to be believable.
Yeah.
The escape that these men plan, the fact that they're plotting this escape under the noses of Nazis who suspect them of escaping at an inescapable prison.
And there's several hundred people involved.
Oh, several hundred people. They're all coordinated.
250.
Yeah. It just all seems pretty absurd.
Yeah. A little bit.
In spite of that, it actually happened. So a few details to get out of the way. This was directed by John Sturges, who most people probably know from The Magnificent Seven. Sturges directed a ton of films, including another movie with Magnificent in the title called The Magnificent Yankee, which is a biopic of Oliver Wendell Holmes. He also has a movie that he directed after The Great Escape called The Satan Bug.
Ooh.
Yeah, which...
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan. This wasn't even on my radar for the Hail Satan episode. I think it's also a bioterrorism movie, not so much about Satan himself. But anyway, cast here is pretty terrific. Steve McQueen is in this, as is Donald Pleasance, Richard Attenborough, James Garner, Charles Bronson, James Coburn. Pretty stacked cast. And yeah, all of this actually happened in some capacity. You can visit the prison today. It's located in Poland. They consulted with some of the prisoners who actually escaped for historical accuracy. There are some instances where the facts are adjusted. This prison actually held closer to 1,600 men as opposed to the roughly 250 to 300 that you see in the movie. About a third of those 1,600 were actually involved in planning the escape. There were also some Germans who didn't sympathize with the Nazis, who really played a significant role in helping the prisoners procure supplies. And then, unlike the movie, a lot of the actual escapees were either British or Canadian. Only one American was involved. One part of the film that was decidedly not historically accurate are the motorcycle scenes. A condition of Steve McQueen's involvement in the film was that he'd be allowed to show off his motorcycle skills.
That's fucking sweet.
So they were all just total fiction. And there's a lot of like Steve McQueen riding around on a motorcycle in the third act that's just like, well, this seems weird.
It's in my contract.
Yeah, I got to show off. So why did I choose this? I'm really just amazed that all of this took place, and it worked. The prison that these guys are sent to in the movie is supposed to hold about 250 men, and the plan is to break all of them out. The fact that from the moment most of these guys arrive at the prison, that they begin instantly working on getting themselves and everyone else out is pretty remarkable. I also love the idea that there's a group of men who are notorious for breaking out of prisons.
And it seems like they're like, that's what our job is, to get caught and try to break out of prison.
Right. And the Nazis brought them all together. And, sure, they built a quote-unquote escape-proof prison, but it's like, let's bring all these dudes who exclusively break out of prisons. It's a funny story. The plan that they put together is remarkable. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to they're going to tunnel their way out of this prison, and they're going to dig 4 incredibly long tunnels that are like 30 feet down and then hundreds of feet long in different directions in order to like get out. That alone is pretty amazing. And then the things that I have to do to pull this off, whether it's like hiding the dirt or gathering the supplies, or like they have a whole plan for, you know, donning normal clothes and having forged documents for when they get out. Like all of that is worked on.
That's what I couldn't understand. They were like, you're just going to show up into this town with 250 people, or just going to like walk into this small town in Poland and no one's going to notice?
Right. Yeah, it does raise some questions.
Yes.
But, you know, again, there were a lot of people in Germany who were not sympathetic to the Nazi cause.
I guess you got to try too.
You got to try.
You got to try.
As I've told you, the one thing about this movie that strikes me as a little bit weird is the third act. So we see about 50 of these guys actually escape before their attempt is foiled. And then once those guys are out, you know, they're out in the world, kind of all heading in different directions, and the Nazis, who are completely aloof and just bad at detecting this escape effort while it's underway, become incredibly skilled at tracking these guys down, which I guess they did, because they find all but 3 of the escapees among the 50 some odd guys that got out, and 50 of them were executed, and the movie becomes dedicated to those men, the ones who died after they were recaptured. Speaking of the third act, it's about 40 minutes of this movie's nearly 3-hour runtime.
Yes.
So this is not a short film, but it's pretty great. You know, Sturgis was encouraged adamantly by the studios to cut this down, and he was like, "I can't do it. This is the story. This is how it needs to be told." He refused to.
There's not a ton of fat on it.
No, there isn't.
But it's long. It's a complicated story.
Yeah. It is. But it turned out to be a bona fide classic. Cemented Steve McQueen as a star. Tells a true story that's almost too wild to believe.
It inspired 1,000 heist movies.
It sure did. And
it's like Ocean's 250.
Yeah. It's a great one. So for this week, it's my final pick for True Stories.
Great choice. It's a fun movie.
It is. Well, hey, thanks again for paying a visit to Rewind Video. This week, the staff recommendation shelf is stocked with 6 movies where the facts take center stage. And the true stories that we chose are Dolemite Is My Name, The Social Network, Quiz Show, I, Tonya, City of God, and The Great Escape.
You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and now TikTok. Get on our mailing list for our newsletter at rewindvideopod.com. And if you like the show, be kind. Recommend it to a friend.
Please do. That does it for this week's episode. Next time, tune in as we take on a theme that we're calling That's Delicious.
That's right.
Yeah. As always, we'll have 6 movies to recommend, but of course, we're interested in what you think, so don't hesitate to hit us up on social. In the meantime, feel free to stop by the counter for a movie to watch. We will see you next time.
Thanks for stopping by. True story.